Hey guys, tonight we drift gently back to ancient Rome, not to see Caesar's conquests or gladiator battles, but to sit quietly, half snoozing, inside the Curia. Julia, you're one of the many senators crammed onto stone benches, all sweating, in layers of itchy wool, waiting for a vote that may or may not happen today. The buzz of conversation is low and tired. You shift slightly, your left leg's asleep. The marble under you is unforgiving. Your eyes blur from staring at the same cracked column for the last 40 minutes. Welcome to the boredom before democracy. It's the kind of moment you probably wouldn't survive in real life. No phone, no chair cushion, no iced coffee. Just an endless wait in a room that smells faintly of old perfume, garlic breath, and sun-drenched fabric. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know where you're tuning in from tonight, and what time it is where you are now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into the Curia just after sunrise. Toga already damp in the folds. It's election season again, which means long mornings and longer afternoons of sitting, waiting, sweating, and pretending to care about procedural language. The Curia isn't glamorous today, just a tall rectangle of shadows and echoes. The stone floor traps the heat, and the benches, polished smooth by 1,000 board butts, are as hard as they were during the Republic. You take your usual seat, third from the back, near a column that lets in the tiniest breeze. The guy next to you, Lucius, is already fanning himself with a folded piece of parchment and humming what might be a funeral dirge. Someone dropped a date pit nearby. You stare at it for several minutes. It does not move. The formal opening began over an hour ago. You missed most of it because you were stuck in a toga folding crisis. Tying one of these things correctly should count as a military achievement. Yours keeps slipping just enough to annoy you, but not enough to be worth fixing. That's how the day's going. Eventually, someone up front, maybe the Princeps Senatus, or just some random overachiever, starts droning through the order of the day. You pretend to listen. Everyone pretends. You nod solemnly, though you're mostly thinking about whether you should try to bring a cushion next time. You could hide it under your tunic and claim it's a medical necessity. Your cousin got away with that excuse for 2 months last year. This session isn't even about a big law. It's some minor infrastructure. Think something about redirecting aqueduct flow to support bathhouses in a suburb no one's ever heard of. Still, they have to go through the motions. The Republic may be dead, but bureaucracy, oh, it thrives. The senators fan themselves. The occasional cough echoes dramatically. A low murmur of bored Latin passes from one side of the hall to the other. You shift again. Maybe lean slightly to the left. Does that help? Nope. And then there's the benches. You'd think, with all the Roman ingenuity, the arches, the aqueducts, the underfloor heating, someone would have invented a comfortable seat. But no. The senatorial benches are a sadistic masterwork. Stone slabs, gently curved so you're always sliding just a little forward, no matter how you sit. There's a rumor that Augustus designed them that way on purpose, to keep senators awake. If true, you want to curse him, but quietly and with respect. A mild breeze rolls through the open doorway. A moment of hope, but then the doors groan shut. Maybe for acoustics, maybe for drama, maybe just because the guy in charge had a dramatic streak, and now the air thickens again. You glance around. One senator is already asleep, chin resting on his chest. Nobody wakes him. That's the unspoken rule. If someone can manage to sleep through the Curia heat and droning voices without toppling over, they've earned it. And yet, despite the monotony, there's something rhythmic to it. The slow shuffling of togas, the faint scratch of styluses on wax tablets, the occasional throat clear. Like the world's slowest orchestra warming up but never quite starting, historically speaking. Most Senate meetings were far from thrilling. Sure, there were exceptions: the assassination of Caesar, the wild declarations of war, the epic debates. But most of the time, it was this. Endless speeches, posturing, waiting for a vote that might get delayed, then redebated, then delayed again. Sometimes senators brought food, sometimes they just passed notes. One historian even claimed they played something like paper football with pebbles and scraps of parchment when nobody important was looking, and the togas. Don't get started. The dress code was strictly enforced. White, wool, and roughly the size of a small circus tent. You weren't allowed to wear anything underneath that could be considered relaxing. The point was to look formal, not feel human. You've got layers clinging to you like steamed cabbage, and you're supposed to look dignified. You shift again. Now your left foot is tingling, like it might revolt. The senator beside you, some guy from Campania, sighs deeply. Not at you. Just at life. And still, the vote doesn't begin. One of the junior scribes enters quietly with a wax tablet. He delivers it to a senator near the front. That senator glances at it and smirks slightly. The note is likely unimportant, or scandalous, or both. The Curia has always been Rome's most boring soap opera. There's a scratching sound near your feet. A beetle. No, just a pebble rolling under someone's sandal. Still, you stare at it for several seconds longer than necessary. Entertainment historians still argue whether these long delays were truly necessary, or just the result of a bloated political machine trying to look busy. One scholar called it the art of legislating by endurance, where everyone down until nobody has the energy to oppose you seems to be working. You rest your elbow on your knee, just for a second. The guy next to you does the same. You both look like statues of defeat. Outside, a bird chirps. Briefly, gloriously, and then it's gone. Back inside the Senate. Nothing moves. The vote hasn't started, but your eyelids feel heavier now, lulled by heat, silence, and the soft whisper of boredom wearing its favorite toga. The scroll in your lap is mostly decorative at this point. You've opened it and unrolled a third, which looks scholarly from a distance. But in reality, it's the same speech you've heard Cicero give 5 times. It's part legal argument, part political philosophy, and 100% a cure for wakefulness. You stare at the lines of ink, trying to make your eyes follow the sentences, but the words blur together like melted honey on a hot day around you. The senators perform the ancient Roman art of looking busy. One old man in the front row is nodding slowly and thoughtfully at nothing. Another is pretending to read a scroll upside down. You squint. Yes, upside down. No one says a word. You consider turning your scroll over and pretending it's a new one. Maybe if you look confused enough, someone will think you're deep in economic theory. You adjust your face into the expression you've seen Cicero make when he's calculating tax ratios: furrowed brow, slight frown, a single nod every 90 seconds. Nobody's buying it, but nobody cares. The room is locked in a standoff between attention and surrender. To your left, a pair of younger senators whisper conspiratorially. You can't hear what they're saying, but their eyebrows are doing the heavy lifting. The way they glance toward the exit makes you think they're plotting a fake emergency, maybe my cousin's chariot caught fire, or urgent family goose-related matter. Standard excuses. You shift again. The stone bench is pressing into your tailbone with the persistence of a tax collector. No cushion, no mercy. Just Roman engineering at its most unforgiving. In front of you, someone drops a stylus. It clinks against the floor and rolls into a crack in the stone. The senator sighs but makes no move to retrieve it. It's gone. Like his will to live, the guy behind you coughs once, dramatically. The kind of cough meant to signal I'm bored but still here. No one responds, not even a glance. That's how deep into the boredom spiral everyone is. There's no energy left for shared suffering. Now someone begins quietly rearranging his scrolls. 1, 2, 3. Back again. Then, very deliberately, he dusts off the edge of his toga, twice, as if preparing to deliver a grand statement. But he doesn't. He just sighs and stares at the ceiling. And still, the vote is delayed. The cause, unclear. Possibly an official's late arrival. Possibly someone's dramatic entrance being carefully timed for maximum impact. Or possibly just the timeless Roman tradition of making everyone wait because power looks best when it doesn't show up on time. You stare across the hall at a senator you've never spoken to, but seen 100 times. He always sits with the same wax tablet balanced on his knee, always nods twice during debates, and always has one sandal untied. You begin to wonder if it's a political statement. Maybe he's anti-shoelace. Maybe it's a ritual. Maybe he just can't bend that far. And as your eyes drift upward to the beams of the curious ceiling, you catch a spider. A big one, just slowly spinning a web in the corner, entirely unbothered by the slow decay of collective senatorial energy. You wonder how long he's been there. Has he outlived some of the senators? Probably. You think about naming him Gaius, maybe. It's this kind of thought wandering, a little ridiculous, that keeps your brain occupied during the lulls. That, and the pure theater of watching your colleagues try to out-serious each other. Now comes the silent judging. It starts subtly. One senator gives another a slow, skeptical once-over. It's not about policy, it's about fashion. Is that toga too off-white, too tightly folded? Is he wearing last year's clasp? From across the room, someone's single, disdainful breath through the nose. The victim of the snort pretends not to notice, but adjusts his brooch slightly, as if to say, yes, this is gold-threaded linen, thank you for noticing. Historians still argue whether Roman senators truly cared about appearance this much, or whether the records we have are just exaggerated by gossipy scribes. But even if it's partly mythed, the atmosphere of competitive elegance feels very real in this room. Somewhere behind you, a whisper flutters through the air like a badly aimed pigeon. You catch a few words: bulbous grapes, theft, juicy. Not literal grapes, though with Romans, you never rule that out. Probably metaphorical. Or maybe both. You wonder how much of the Senate's day is consumed by gossip dressed up as political concern. Concerns over fiscal policy often translates into, "I heard he eats like a barbarian." Moral decline sometimes just means his daughter wears scandalous sandals. In the row ahead, a senator folds his arms and stares at the entrance. The one where the absent official still hasn't arrived. His expression is that of a man rehearsing a scathing speech in his head. You know, the type he'll stand up just before the vote starts and demand answers. The speech will include the phrase "the dignity of the Senate," and everyone will clap exactly once, out of habit, before sinking back into their discomfort. You decide to look at your scroll again, just for something to do. The ink has faded in places, probably from your sweaty thumb smudging the same line over and over. It talks about grain allocations. You don't care. Nobody here cares. But someone, somewhere, will care if it isn't discussed. That's the curse of public servicer, always responsible for something nobody wants to deal with. And still no vote. You close your eyes, just for a second. You let your thoughts drift to that bathhouse near the Tiber, the one with the good steam room. You imagine being there, new steam rising, soft murmurs, hot stones underfoot, and a servant with a tray of wine-diluted water. But then a voice coughs out, "Consul's not come yet." No surprise. The room groans internally. No one moves. Now one moves. Now someone's playing a low rhythm on the bench with his knuckles. Not a song, just something to feel like time is moving. It isn't. You look down at your feet. Sandals slightly dusty, toga edge dragging against the floor. You flick at a thread. It resists, then gives way. Victory. Another senator pulls out a tiny bronze mirror to check his hair. You don't question it. In the midst of all this stillness, one thought rises above the rest. This is what governing often looks like. Not action, not shouting, not grand decisions, but just waiting, staring, pretending to read, measuring. The weight of silence, and sometimes, in the middle of it, wondering if you really did hear someone mention a stolen grape. You hear it before you smell it, the crinkle of dried figs being unwrapped from a cloth pouch. Somewhere in the rows ahead, a senator has decided that if the vote isn't going to come to him, then at the very least, sugar will. The sound cuts through the stillness like a fork dropped in a silent dining room. Everyone hears it. No one acknowledges it. Then comes the scent, sweet, fermented, vaguely suspicious. Dried figs in this heat always seem to smell like they've already spent 3 days fermenting in a clay pot. The air inside the curia shifts just slightly, and now you catch another note. Garlic, of course. You glance sideways. Lucius is holding a fig in one hand and has just taken the smallest bite imaginable. Like he's afraid the fig might sue him for harassment. He chews solemnly, like it's part of some ancient ritual. You want to ask him if it tastes like regret, but he's already staring at the wall like he's trying to mentally relocate his soul to somewhere cooler. And then it hits, the unmistakable ripple of digestive unrest. Someone, somewhere in the room, has loosed a silent but deadly cloud. It could be the figs, or last night's lentils, or just the human toll of holding in a breath for 2 hours. You don't know who did it, but the temperature seems to rise 5 degrees. and you suddenly become aware that your breathing has become very shallow. No one moves, no one makes eye contact. But a few nostrils flare. One senator sniffs twice, and then subtly shifts his toga over his mouth like a curtain of scented denial. It's moments like this that make you question Roman architecture. The Curia Julia is tall, noble, and shockingly poor at ventilation. You think longingly of the atriums, in the homes on Palatine Hill upon air, birds fluttering, fountains trickling. Here, you get scroll dust, bad figs, and one senator who wears too much saffron oil and doesn't believe in moderation. You decide to retaliate by opening your own snack can, olive stuffed date from your sash. You make sure to crinkle the cloth, just enough to let Lucius know you're not impressed with his fig. He doesn't respond. He's either deeply meditating or has fully dissociated. Historians still argue whether Roman senators were allowed to eat openly during sessions. Some sources say it was discouraged unless the meeting went long. Others claim certain senators basically turned their seats into little personal buffets. One fringe theory insists that a senator once smuggled in roasted dormice under his toga and offered them around like candy. You pray that's just a legend, though you wouldn't be entirely surprised. The rhythm of passive-aggressive snacking continues. A small rustle here, a tiny crunch there. It's not loud, but it builds, like a culinary Morse code, signaling frustration. Then comes a hiccup, loud, sudden, and undeniably wet-sounding. Every head turns briefly, then back. It came from somewhere in the upper rows. You hear a cough of embarrassment, followed by a muttered prayer to Jupiter. The senator 2 seats over silently offers a sprig of mint. No one laughs. You don't laugh either, but the corners of your mouth rebel slightly. Someone shifts, and their sandal squeaks against the floor. That one squeak echoes off the walls with the gravity of a war trumpet. You glance up, expecting someone to yell order, but nothing. Just a pigeon fluttering briefly past a window. You wish you could follow it. Now Lucius begins chewing a second fig. He makes a sound like he's dying slowly inside. You lean slightly away, just in case the next thing to emerge is more than a sigh. In the row behind, 2 senators start whispering, again. You catch bits and pieces. Brought cheese once, left it under the bench. Smelled like Neptune's armpit. And then they both nod, solemnly. You wonder what happened to that cheese. Was it confiscated? Did it gain sentience? You let your eyes drift around the chamber. There are over 300 senators in Rome at this point, though far fewer show up to these kinds of sessions. Still, the Curia is moderately full. Some faces you recognize from the forum, others from whispered scandals, and a few only because they sit exactly the same way every time, like statues of mediocrity. To your right, a senator has started humming. Softly, just enough to register. It sounds like a marching tune, slowed down to the pace of despair. He stops after 4 notes and returns to staring blankly ahead. Your stomach makes a noise. Not hunger, exactly. More a protest. You try to ignore it. A low burp escapes someone a few rows down. No apology. Just a shrug. He's the kind of senator who probably thinks the Senate exists solely for his comfort. He reclines slightly, the curve of his spine suggesting the posture of a man who believes the empire should revolve around his naps. And now the Curia smells like a confusing blend of old fruit, Sweat, herbs, and ego. You notice a new scroll has been passed to the front. It may be a revised agenda, or a poem, or a coded insult. You don't really care anymore. Your focus has narrowed to the small fleck of something wax ash, dried fig on your sandal. You flick it off and feel momentarily victorious. Then suddenly a sneeze, a huge one, echoing. Someone's head snaps forward like a catapult fired it. A chorus of salve responses follows. That's the most unified noise the Senate has made all day. There's a saying among senators, better 10 wars than one. Senate vote. Today, you believe it. At least a war ends eventually. This is eternal. You close your eyes again. Not to nap, just to mentally disassociate from the sensory onslaught. You think about the Tiber, about cold water, about olives that don't smell like betrayal. You wonder if you could just fall over gently and fake a fainting spell. But then, you'd lose your seat, and it's finally starting to warm in a not unpleasant way. The session drags on. A fig drops to the floor and rolls 3 rows ahead before someone silently picks it up and pockets it. For later, maybe. For survival, and still. The vote doesn't come. You begin to wonder whether the session is actually a test, a slow psychological trial to see who breaks first. Will it be the fig eater, the hiccuper, the humming man, or will it be you? 2 senators near the main column are whispering now, their heads almost touching, their gestures wild enough to suggest someone has deeply offended someone else, probably about footwear. You pretend not to listen, but the whispers are juicy. Did you see how Marcus wore his tunic inside the toga folds again? One says, as if announcing a treasonous act. Another murmurs, he calls it relaxed draping, scandalous. Debates, not even the bribery. It's the low-level, absolutely banal gossip. Roman senators had a reputation to uphold, but that didn't stop them from whispering about each other's hairlines, perfume choices, or whose wife was seen at the forum with that Greek tutor. You, of course, keep your ears open while staring blankly at a patch of wall. The old senator 2 seats down has perfected this move. Eyes unfocused, mouth slightly ajar, fingers tapping his knee in time with nothing. To all observers, he looks half asleep. In truth, he's memorizing every word from the conversation in front of him. You try to copy the expression. It takes effort. Your lip starts twitching. Cicero's new slave, someone hisses. Did you hear what he said to the magistrate? Know what? That he preferred Egyptian architecture. You suppress a gasp. In this town, saying you like pyramids more than arches is like calling Jupiter a bit overhyped. And this from a slave. You admire his bravery, or suicidal tendencies. Possibly both. The whisperers turn suddenly serious. One glances back, toward the podium. The other shrugs. Still not here. The vote, it seems, is in political limbo. The presiding consul, who may or may not be at his villa eating grapes and philosophizing about plumbing, is still missing. Which means the Senate is still waiting, and whispering, and watching. One senator in the back begins pacing slowly, deliberately, as if his sandals are made of lead and every step is a performance. He's probably trying to draw attention, to signal, look how troubled I am by this delay. But everyone is too distracted by a new round of murmurs. Did you hear what happened to Flavius? The guy who built that temple with the crooked columns. That's the one. Know what? He fainted mid-session. you blink. That would explain the new rule about staying hydrated. Apparently, Flavius had stood up to make a routine comment about olive tariffs and just keeled over. No warning, just gone. They carried him out, and the session still didn't end. A slave cleaned the wax tablet he dropped, and everyone kept going like it was normal. This, you think, is what institutional stability looks like. Or maybe institutional madness. Hard to say. Historians still argue whether the Roman Senate genuinely cared about these extended delays, or simply accepted them as part of the pageantry. Some scholars argue it was part of Rome's deep ritualistic culture. Every delay was a subtle reaffirmation that power didn't rush. Others claim it was just laziness with a marble backdrop back in the present. Another voice joins the whisper circle near you. It's Sextus, famous for his chin dimple and his addiction to speculative slander. I heard, he says dramatically, that one of the senators is actually a Gaul. A collective inhalation follows. A Gaul in the Senate. He has Roman papers. But I swear, his accent, the conversation halts as a breeze shifts through the chamber and a new smell wafts in. You hope it's rosemary from someone's perfume. You hope it's not a repeat of the fig incident. Lucius taps you with his elbow. Did you hear that? He whispers. You nod, as if you had. No, you say truthfully. He leans closer. They're saying Caesar might show up. That gets your attention. Julius himself. The man, the myth, the walking calendar. Doubtful. He rarely attends the smaller sessions, especially not these rural water management votes. But if he did, things would certainly become less boring if, also more dangerous. Half the room would stand. The other half would panic. And at least 3 senators would faint and blame their sandals. You'd think he'd really come here. You whisper. Lucius shrugs. He's unpredictable. Like a lion in a toga. That's an image. Another senator, evidently caught up in the drama, accidentally drops a small clay figurine from his bag. It hits the floor with a tiny toke. You glance down. A household god. Lares maybe. A travel charm. You're not sure whether to feel comforted or concerned that someone brought divine help just to get through today. You lean back, stretching your neck slightly. The marble wall behind you is cool for a moment. You press your head against it like a plant reaching for shade. Bliss. And then an audible TSK. Someone disapproves. Strongly. The TSKA is a notoriously conservative senator who believes comfort is for barbarians. You make eye contact with him, then slowly lean forward again. You don't want to get into a silent morals battle today. It's too hot, too dull, and the vote still hasn't started. The gossip shifts now away from people, toward cities. Someone's claiming Capua might outshine Rome in the next century. Bold, probably stupid. But bold, another senator mutters. You ever been to Capua once? Smelled like cooked eels and broken dreams. Exactly. The whole conversation turns into a roast session. Naples is too smug. Ostia is just wet sand with good seafood. Pompeii. Only good for mosaics and questionable morals. You think about jumping in with a joke about Tarquinia and goat festivals, but you're too tired. Also, you're not sure if that's a real thing or a weird dream you once had. Now someone in the corner is drawing something in the dust on the floor with a stylus. Face. Possibly Caesar's. Possibly a fish. Lucius peeks over. Do you think he's possessed? You shrug. Possessed by boredom? Maybe. And still, the door to the consul's chamber remains closed, no footsteps. No announcement, just the continued hum of ancient gossip, soft sandals shuffling, the scent of overripe figs, and the collective will of Rome's highest council slowly melting into the floor. You close your eyes again, and wonder if anyone will notice if you lie down. Flat, a sudden gust of wind presses through a gap near the roof beams and rattles the scrolls stacked on a side table. For a moment, you think something exciting might happen, like a papyrus avalanche, or at least a dramatic unrolling. But no. The scrolls settle back in place, obedient as ever, and the chamber returns to its usual sluggish hum. Then, just ahead of you, a minor theatrical event. Gaius, a senator known for his flair and strong opinions on almost everything, stands abruptly and flings his cloak over one shoulder with the sort of sweeping drama usually reserved for tragic actors on the stage. The motion is crisp, purposeful, very toga forward, all heads turn, waiting to see if the speech is coming. Maybe this is it, the spark that will reignite interest in aqueduct zoning. You straighten up slightly, hopeful, but Gaius simply crosses his arms and sighs audibly, like a man who has suffered greatly at the hands of tardy colleagues and tepid room temperatures. Then he sits down again. No speech, no protest. Just an epic cloak toss and a commitment to being the moodiest man in the room. No one claps. No one dares to. You do admire the cloak technique that landed in a perfect swoop over his arm. That takes practice. The eye-roll Olympics begin shortly after first. The senator across from you lifts one eyebrow and rotates his eyeballs like he's trying to inspect the back of his own skull. A bold opening. Another, younger man counters with a slow blink and a theatrical exhale. He even adds a small headshake for extra flair. You toss in your own subtle, understated, more of an internal eye roll, but one that speaks volumes. It says, I too am trapped here, and I too have opinions. The whisperers nearby catch wind of the mood and switch topics. Now it's about someone's overuse of the term senatorial gravitas. Apparently, Titus used it 3 times in a single speech last week, and once to describe his pet dog. There's a ripple of stifled laughter, which is dangerous. Once one senator starts to chuckle, the whole chamber is at risk of collapsing into chaos. One time, during a particularly tense debate over grain taxes, a senator sneezed mid-sentence and said "bless me" in Greek instead of Latin. The session had to be paused for 20 minutes because everyone got the giggles. It doesn't happen. Today, though, the room self-corrects. The ancient gears of self-importance grind back into place. You return to fidgeting with your toga. The hem is twisted. You try to straighten it, but this only succeeds in pulling the neckline tighter. Now, you feel like you're being gently strangled by a woolly snake. You stop before it becomes noticeably or fatal. Historians still argue whether senators practiced their cloak choreography before sessions. Some believe it was spontaneous drama. Others insist these gestures were deeply calculated, part of the visual language of Roman politics. Like a silent code, cloak toss equals outrage, arm cross equals disappointment, exaggerated sigh equals passive-aggressive threat of future speech. Suddenly, the senator 2 seats away sneezes. A quiet one, but with gusto. Heads swivel again. Someone mutters, "Sign of the gods." Someone else says, "No, just a dusty scroll." Either way, the moment passes, and the curious slouches back into its usual rhythm's stiff backs. Fake reading. The occasional scribble. Speaking of scribbling, the senator in front of you has pulled out a wax tablet and stylus. You watch as he starts writing slowly and deliberately. You can't see what, exactly, but his expression is extremely serious. Like he's drafting a declaration of war. Or a grocery list. Inspired, you retrieve your own wax tablet and begin to write. At first, it's just aimless lines. Then, for some reason, you draw a duck in a helmet, with a small gladius in its wing. You think this might be your best work yet. Lucius leans over and peers down. He says nothing, just raises one eyebrow in judgmental amusement and returns to his own empty scroll. You consider adding a tiny shield to your duck. Maybe label him Marcus Quackius, but you resist. You're supposed to look senatorial. Instead, you carve out a few lines of fake financial calculations. They look impressive enough from a distance. You add a frown to complete the illusion. Serious matters. Vital civic numbers. Definitely not poultry doodles. Someone passes by and glances at your tablet. You nod, slow and sage-like. They nod back. Mission accomplished. A few rows over, a minor skirmish breaks out over seating. Two senators, both trying to sit adjacent to the shade beam, are currently thigh wrestling without moving their upper bodies. It's a battle of millimeters. Neither yields. You watch with interest. Eventually, a third senator intervenes by pretending to need space to stretch his leg. Both combatants are forced to shift. The shade beam moves anyway, and still, the console does not arrive by now. Several senators have resorted to staring at the same spot on the wall. You pick your own spot, just above a carved inscription listing the names of a long-dead consul and his 5 equally long-dead sons. The stone is chipped. One of the letters is missing. You decide it used to be a Q. Someone coughs. Another fig is opened. The duck on your tablet now has sandals. Your neck cracks as you adjust your position. You vaguely remember something. In the 12 tables about spinal realignment from poor seating. Or maybe that was a dream. The man behind you drops his stylus and curses softly. You pretend not to hear. Everyone pretends not to hear. And then another cloak toss. This one less dramatic, more desperate. The room is slowly unraveling. You rub your eyes and wonder. Is it still morning? It can't be. The light has shifted. The heat has softened slightly. Somewhere, beyond the walls, the world continues. Merchants yell in the forum. Oxen pull carts. Children argue over whose turn it is to spin a hoop. But here, time has slowed to the pace of toga folds and exasperated sighs. You rest your chin on your fist. Just a moment of peace. You imagine the duck saluting. The duck understands. The vote is still delayed. But now you think, you might not mind. You're halfway through carving a tiny olive branch into the wax tablet. Your duck has declared peace, apparently when a low voice near the chamber entrance mumbles something about lentils. You don't catch the whole sentence, but the word alone is enough to stir the bench around you. Lentils. Lucius leans in, whispering. He said, lentils are more honorable than chickpeas. You freeze. That's bold. A second voice hisses, Chickpeas built Rome, lentils are a garnish. Someone farther down scoffs, loud enough for it to echo. Garnish, lentils are a meal. And just like that, the chamber comes alive not with political fervor, but with culinary outrage. The debate begins informally, almost softly, as if the senators aren't entirely sure they're allowed to get passionate about legumes in public. But passion wins. You turn to Lucius. You prefer lentils. He hesitates. I mean chickpeas. Have that grainy texture. They do, you agree, as if this settles a great matter of state within minutes. A senator stands up to make an actual point on the record. He believes lentils represent the humble Roman farmer, the salt of the citizen soldier. Chickpeas, he insists, are for imported salads and Greek overcomplication. Have you seen how Athenians prepare them? He cries, as if invoking a culinary nightmare. The crowd is split. You're split. Your stomach, still protesting earlier. Snacks offers no guidance. A younger senator dares to mention fava beans. Everyone ignores him. Historians still argue whether food debates ever officially entered Senate records. Some say they were side chatter, never documented. Others believe that entire subcommittees may have existed done officially, of course too. Argue about the virtues of Roman diets. One cracked tablet fragment even suggests a senator tried to pass a motion declaring lentils the pulse of the republic. Whether that motion passed is, sadly, unknown in the present. The debate only grows more intense. I've seen chickpeas grow in my own soil. One senator bellows, slapping his chest for emphasis. They take forever to soak, counters another. They cause digestion issues, mutters someone from the back. And suddenly, a fragile silence. Everyone knows what that means. You've circled back to an earlier topic, flatulence. The entire chamber takes a moment to reflect on that reality. To shift gears, someone suggests a vote. On beans, not the vote you came for, no. That's still nowhere in sight. But now there's momentum, actual energy. Senators begin proposing formal arguments. Someone tries to summon a scribe to document it. You, meanwhile, sit in stunned amusement. This chamber meant for declarations of war, policy on land ownership, matters of taxes and treason is now gearing up for a vote on which legume best reflects Roman values. You're not even mad. It's something to do. Lucius pulls out a small bag and shakes it. Guess what's in here? You raise an eyebrow. Chickpeas. He nods. Roasted, want one. You accept two. They're dry, slightly burnt, but oddly comforting. You chew. Slowly, thoughtfully, and decide that while lentils are gentler, chickpeas have grit. You can respect that. Suddenly, a senator stands to deliver what he clearly believes is a speech. His cloak sways, his voice projects, and he declares, "Let no man here forget that the great Scipio Africanus was raised on lentil porridge." Another man shoots back, "And Cato the Elder had chickpeas with every evening meal." Lies. Prove it, someone yells. Ask his ghost. Someone else shouts, "That's necromancy." A pause. Then laughter. A blessed, brief wave of giggles overtakes the chamber. Even the usually stone-faced senators crack a smile. It's infectious. You smile too, because there's something beautiful about watching grown men in wool blankets shout about legumes with the same intensity. They once used to debate Hannibal. As the laughter dies down, The energy fades too. Like steam rising from a boiling pot, it disperses. Silence creeps back in. A few senators cough politely. One adjusts his scroll. Another reaches for a water skin, but the spell has broken. For a few minutes, you weren't just waiting, you were living, arguing, connecting, in a ridiculous, completely non-legislative way. You glance at your wax tablet again. The duck now stands next to a small chickpea, or maybe a lentil. You add arms to it for effect. A quiet voice near the door suggests a recess. It's not a real motion, just a sigh, dressed up as a suggestion. Nobody moves. Lucius stretches, gently. His back cracks in 3 distinct places. If I don't vote soon, I'll turn into a statue. You'd make a good one, you reply. The patron saint of aimless waiting. I'd hold a fig, he says, raising one like a trophy. You chuckle softly and glare at chickpeas. He nods eternally. Your bench shifts slightly as someone stands, probably heading out to find a breeze or relieve himself. You consider joining, but the effort feels overwhelming. Plus, you don't want to give up your seat. It's finally molded to your shape. Gaze upward. The carved beams seem to shimmer now, or maybe your vision's just blurring. The heat has changed. Less aggressive, more like a thick blanket, drowsy, soothing. The chamber is quiet again, save for the occasional cough, the soft scrape of a sandal, and the rhythmic breathing of several half-dozing senators. The lentil debate fades into memory. A moment of passion in a sea of waiting, and still no consul, no vote, just the curia, breathing quietly in unison, waiting together, wilting slightly, and wondering if, perhaps, the real legislation was the legumes we argued about along the way. You lean your elbow on your knee and stare into the middle distance, contemplating the high-stakes absurdity of the chickpea-lentil fiasco. At least it woke everyone up for a bit. But now the room is sinking back into its natural state, one of high-minded apathy. A familiar sound cuts through the silence, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a stylus on wax. Someone's thinking. You glance over and see it's old Marcus Scribonius again. He's tapping not in thought, but as a passive-aggressive signal that it's time for lunch. Several heads turn. They know the sound. Everyone knows the sound. You all collectively pretend not to. A new voice speaks. Is anyone else hungry? That word lands like a thunderclap. Heads snap up. A few senators glance at their sandals as though the soles might contain a sandwich. One man simply closes his eyes and lets the word wash over him. It begins the great lunchtime debate. Technically, says one senator, we are not supposed to eat during a formal session. Technically, replies another, this session hasn't formally begun. So, now everyone's eyes flicker to their pouches, their sleeves, their secret toga folds. A rustle here, a crinkle there. You spot dried dates, walnuts, a pocket-sized chunk of cold barley loaf. Someone even has a tiny fig on cheese wrap, folded expertly in cloth like it's been smuggled from a gourmet tavern, and suddenly, the entire Roman Senate looks like a covert picnic club. You pull out a single roasted almond from your pouch. You nibble it slowly, trying not to seem too enthusiastic. Next to you, Lucius has begun peeling a boiled egg with slow, deliberate grace, as though unveiling a priceless artifact. The smell is subtle but definitive. Heads turn. He smiles, as if to say, Yes, I am that senator. Across the aisle, someone opens a small jar, probably olives. The scent drifts over. You inhale without shame. You'd sell your extra stylus for a good olive right now. Somewhere near the center of the chamber, a quiet pop. Someone uncorks a tiny flask of watered wine. There's a gasp. Someone whispers, "That's against protocol." Another says, "Unless it's for medicinal purposes." A third senator mumbles, "Everything's medicinal if your bones ache enough." You nod in quiet agreement, even though nobody's speaking to you. Your bones do ache. From the bench, from the boredom, from being asked to live through another delay without sustenance. Historians still argue whether food was allowed in the Curia. Some accounts claim senators were required to remain composed and fasting through deliberations. But scattered sources, mostly scribes with long memories and a taste for drama, mention everything from crusty breadcrumbs under benches to a time someone allegedly dropped a pickled onion and tried to blame it on divine intervention. Now, though, it's all happening again, in full swing. The Curia becomes a dining hall in soft whispers and slow movements. You hear crunching, a cough that might have been caused by dry bread, a murmured complaint, "Who brings garlic cheese to this heat?" Someone mutters something about civic duty and bladder control, and everyone wisely chooses not to unpack that. Then, from a dark corner, a voice calls out, not loudly, not forcefully, but with the calm confidence of a man used to holding attention. Lentils and chickpeas were both part of the original Roman ration. Gasps. Well, quiet gasps. This is Senator Gellius, rarely heard, but often quoted. A historian by training, a senator by marriage, his scrolls are legendary. His lunches, reportedly, are terrible. But he knows his facts. He continues, now rising. Slowly, the average legionnaire survived on both, along with onions and dried fruit. The Republic was built on boring food, a beat of silence, then so. We honor our ancestors by being miserable. Laughter again, soft and round. The room relaxes, and then it happens. One senator, a thin, wiry man from Iridium, pulls from his pouch an object of legend, a boiled turnip. It's wrapped in vine leaves and tied with a bit of string. You stare, half in horror, half in admiration. The man unwraps it, takes a bite, and chews with the grim serenity of a monk. Someone gasps. Someone else claps once, then pretends they didn't. Lucius leans toward you. We're descending into madness. You nod, delicious madness. Then comes the philosophical debate. Not on laws, not on war, but on lunch as identity. Is a senator not more than his meal? Asks one. Isn't every act, even eating, political? Responds another. You're not sure whether you're witnessing high philosophy or sleep-deprived delusion. Either way, it beats counting the cracks in the marble. A senator near the exit, clearly over it all, lifts his scroll and begins loudly reading the ingredients of his lunch. Barley, sesame paste, dried honey. He's met with scattered applause, and one snide, "Where'd you get honey this late in the season?" Now food is everywhere. Cloak folds burst open with crumbs. Grease stains bloom like tragic flowers. You try not to think about what's happening to the upholstery. What counts as upholstery when it's just polished stone? One senator dips his bread in wine. which somehow sparks a short-lived debate about the morality of soft bread. Meanwhile, your duck drawing now has a lunch bag. You sigh deeply, allow your head to tilt slightly, and savor your last almond. For a second, you almost forget where you are, until you hear a low, tragic voice say, "I dropped my lunch." The room halts. It's the same senator who brought the turnip. The vine leaf wrapping has come loose. The turnip rolls once, twice, and vanishes beneath a bench. Gone. Everyone bows their head, not mockingly, but sincerely. A silent tribute to the fallen meal. Lucius whispers, "We'll remember him." You nod solemnly, and then, as if the gods of irony were finally tuning in, a scribe enters from a side door, quietly placing a fresh scroll at the front. Everyone turns. Is this it? Has the consul finally arrived? A hush falls over the chamber. Chewed figs hang in suspended animation. Flasks are capped. Scrolls lifted slightly in anticipation. The scribe bows and exits, but no footsteps follow. No voice calls out. Just another scroll, probably an update. Possibly about why there's no update. A collective groan ripples through the room. Low and tired, you lean back once again, placing your stylus gently down, and you whisper to Lucius, "At least, I still have a chickpea." He grins, "Then you still have hope." Lucius is trying to balance a chickpea on the curve of his wax tablet when it finally happens. A low creak from the chamber doors. Every spine straightens. Heads lift like meerkats on alert. Even the senator who had nodded off mid-bread chew snaps awake with an awkward snort. The doors swing open. And in steps, not the consul, but a junior clerk holding yet another scroll. You could cry. The clerk looks around, clearly aware of the weight of disappointment settling on the room like a damp blanket. He steps gingerly to the front and hands the scroll to a stone-faced aide, then scurries out again like a man who knows he's just delivered bad news to a room of very hungry politicians. The aide unrolls the scroll, clears his throat. Everyone leans forward. Delay, to be extended. Due to consul's urgent domestic matter. A pause. What kind of domestic matter? Someone asks that the aide, to his credit, doesn't blink. Unspecified. A senator near the front snorts. Probably his goat escaped again. Someone mutters. His goat is more punctual than he is. There's a ripple of cynical amusement, followed by a sharp lull. The room sags. You actually feel it, the collective exhale of 200 men whose last shred of patience just packed its bags and moved to Sicily. Urgent domestic matter, Lucius repeats. You know what that means. You shrug. Nap. With fruit. Nap. On fruit, he says. He's probably sleeping on a bed of grapes while we chew boiled eggs and hope the floor swallows us whole. You consider that visual, honestly. It doesn't seem unlikely. Someone in the upper tier begins composing a letter home aloud. Dear Julia, today we did not vote. Again, I am beginning to forget what voting feels like. Do you remember, my love? The joy of debate, the scent of ink and victory. Someone else yells, "Shut up, Cassius." He yells back, "Never, that's Cassius for you, senator by day, failed playwright by ambition." He has a tragic habit of narrating his own life, out loud, like a hero in an epic poem written entirely in footnotes. You lean back, letting your gaze drift upward once more. The high ceiling of the curia seems even farther away now, like the heavens themselves are avoiding eye contact with this chamber of increasingly cranky mortals, and so begins a new phase of waiting. This one is quieter, not because of obedience, but because of resignation. Everyone is tired now, not just sleepy, existentially tired. Even the whisperers have gone quiet. The only sounds are the occasional cough, the slow scraping of stylus against wax, and the faint rustle of someone rearranging the folds of their toga for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Historians still argue whether this kind of dead time in the Senate was intentional. Some suggest it served a psychological purpose, breaking down personal ego, forcing senators to sit with themselves, to stew in silence until clarity emerged. Others believe it was simply the result of too many powerful men sharing a calendar and refusing to use it properly. There's a low murmur from behind. You half turn and catch the end of a story, something about a senator who once brought a parrot to session, not as a pet, as an assistant. The bird could mimic his voice. The storyteller says, "It said things like, 'Agree with me,' and motion past." "That's absurd." "I saw it," he insists. The bird wore a tiny laurel crown. Lucius raises a brow. "Was it voted in?" "No," the man says, "but it got more respect than Marcus." You chuckle. At this point, nothing sounds too strange to believe. A parrot senator. Sure, you've heard worse arguments from humans. Then unbelievably someone near the door starts juggling, just 2 apples, not great juggling, but enough to draw attention. 3 rows away, a senator gasps. This is a sacred chamber. He's juggling fruit, not daggers, another counters. Still, the juggler drops 1 apple. It rolls between sandals, gathering dust and judgment. He shrugs and eats it. A murmur of admiration. That man knows what he's about. You think about clapping. Decide against it. Another senator stands and begins stretching. Arms overhead, gentle back bends, deep lunges. You recognize him. He was a centurion before politics. His body still remembers how to march. Your back aches just watching him. "I should stretch too," you mutter. Lucius smirks. "We all should. But if I stand now, I might float away." You nod. You feel it too. The light-headed swirl of too much sitting, too little stimulation, and just enough wine-soaked almonds to make you weirdly emotional. You pull your scroll back out. The duck is now wearing a senator's sash. You draw a small banner above him. Dux Annis, defender of delays. Lucius peeks again. He needs a podium. You oblige. The duck now stands on a little platform, 1 foot raised in righteous objection. He is very concerned about aqueduct maintenance, somewhere behind you. A senator begins reciting Virgil. Not badly, but not well. You hear, "Arma virum sic cano," followed by a pause and wait. Is it cano or canto? Lucius says, "Depends how drunk you are." "Cano," you mutter automatically. Show off. Lucius grins. Time drips by. Like honey in winter. Every minute stretches. The walls don't feel quite real anymore, just a suggestion of structure. You're floating now, halfway between consciousness and toga-induced hypnosis. Then, without warning, the door creaks again. This time louder. You don't react right away. No one does. It's the 4th or 5th creak today. Might be another clerk. Or a ghost. You'd be okay with either. But then a voice, a real voice, deep official. The consul will be joining shortly. Gasps audible, unapologetic. One senator drops his stylus. Another stands up too quickly and knocks over his waterskin. It spills down the aisle like a Roman alarm bell. The juggler drops his remaining apple. Shortly, someone yells, "How shortly?" The aide merely repeats, "Shortly," then vanishes. A low roar builds. Not anger, not joy. Just the strange, shared energy of people who have waited too long and might, possibly, finally get to do something. You straighten your toga. Lucius pats down his hair. The duck. He's ready too. You can almost feel it in the room. An electric ripple of maybe it's finally happening. For the first time in what feels like 12 lunar cycles, every senator is fully upright. Even the ones who had gone slack-jawed and dreamy-eyed now blink rapidly. Rejoining the land of the politically living, Lucius smooths his toga with the nervous precision of a man preparing for trial. You do the same, tugging the fold across your chest until it looks vaguely respectable. Somewhere, someone mutters a quiet prayer to Janus because, if there was ever a god for transitions, it's Janus, and this might be a transition. From purgatory to action. A hush falls. The door creaks again, slowly this time, as if dramatized by the fates themselves. And then finally, the consul steps in. He is not in a rush. He is not apologetic. He is also not carrying any grapes, which is disappointing. But he walks with the confident indifference of a man who knows he controls time itself. His toga is pristine, creased just so, his sandals a little too clean for someone claiming to have been delayed by urgent domestic matters. The room instinctively stands. Not because they want to, because it's what you do. The collective rustle is massive wool shifting, benches groaning, dignity snapping back into place. The consul nods, one of those small, regal nods, the kind that says, "Yes, I see you peasants." Then he proceeds to the central platform, adjusts a scroll, and sits. No explanation, no apology. He clears his throat. Let us begin. The words land like a holy incantation. Somewhere a senator exhales so hard it sounds like deflation. And just like that, the session is officially in motion. Except, not really, because now comes the formal preamble. The consul begins reading from a scroll slowly, carefully, like each word is a treasure that must be savored. He thanks the gods. He acknowledges the Senate. He praises the Republic. He greets the spirits of dead ancestors. He says hello to a few prominent families. By name. It takes a while. Lucius leans over and whispers, "At this pace, we'll finish the next aqueduct before he's done." You nod, maybe even two. The consul continues. The word auspicious is used more than once. The word auspices even makes an appearance, which triggers an involuntary eye twitch in one senator who's had too much experience with omens involving birds. At long last, the consul begins outlining the subject of today's vote. It's water rights, specifically, a proposal to divert a portion of the Aqua Marcia to newly developed farmland near Tiber. The room does not erupt, but it does tense. This is one of those topics on the surface, dull as overcooked porridge, but underneath, deep, tangled roots of politics, land disputes, local loyalties, and one very angry senator who believes his cousin owns a portion of that water. Already, You know what's coming. The first speech begins. Senator Cluvius stands. You know Cluvius, everyone does. He's the kind of man who could turn good morning into a 40-minute monologue on seasonal humidity, and now he speaks. He begins with a quote from an Etruscan sage, then a reference to a minor flood from 20 years ago, then, somehow, a personal anecdote about his childhood dislike of damp sandals. You settle in. This is happening. As Cluvius drones, you let your eyes wander. The energy from earlier is fading again, burnt too fast on the hope of movement. Now the room returns to its half-wilted state. The senator beside you is trying to look interested, but his eyes glaze over every time Cluvius says the word tributary. The man behind you has resumed doodling on his wax tablet. You peek. It's not a duck, this time. It's a donkey wearing a wreath. Nice. Lucius, for his part, has gone fully. Still, his face shows polite attention, but you know that look. That's not focus. That's mental hibernation. Cluvius, undeterred, continues. Let us not forget, he intones the lesson of the Mulvian embankment. When we neglect the gods of flow, the gods of flood respond. That gets a few nods, also a few yawns. You lean back slightly and let your mind drift. Historians still argue whether Roman senators truly listened to these speeches. Some claim they did at least enough to catch political barbs and veiled insults. Others argue that most tuned out entirely, relying instead on aides and scribes to summarize anything important. There's even one theory that senators trained themselves to look deeply invested while dreaming of dinner. You decide to test the theory. You focus on Cluvius' voice, then mentally imagine a roast duck with honey glaze. It works better than expected. For a moment, the curious smells like victory. Then Cluvius raises his voice. And what of the sacred aquifers beneath the Tiburtine Valley? That wakes a few senators. One drops his stylus. Another sits upright, as if just realizing he forgot to feed his dogs. The consul taps his ring against the wooden arm of his seat. A subtle reminder to keep things moving. Cluvius takes the hint. He winds down. In conclusion, let the water flow where it has always known to go. Nature is wise. Men are inconsistent. Polite applause. Mostly symbolic. Then comes the rebuttal. It's Senator Ponsa, a younger man, eager, slightly sweaty, but clear in voice. While we respect the history of the water, he says, we must also respect the future of the Republic, and farmers near Tiber need that water. He gestures dramatically, almost knocks over a jug, recovers smoothly. He's not wrong, but his tone is a little too aggressive. The older senators stiffen. He brings up grain yields, soil reports, population needs, and then a slip. He mentions streamlining imperial policy. Oops, there it is. Imperial, the air titans. A few senators exchange quick glances. A couple of scribes stop writing. You feel Lucius twitch beside you. Did he just say, you nod, yep, rookie mistake. Because this is still the Republic, technically. Even if Caesar's shadow looms over every wall, someone clears their throat loudly. Ponsa pales slightly, realizes his slip, and tries to recover with an awkward joke about the Tiber being as unpredictable as the mood of the gods. Doesn't land. The consul makes a small note on his scroll. Probably, remind Ponsa don't imply we live in a monarchy. And just like that, The momentum shifts. Debate continues. Slowly, carefully, a few senators echo Cluvius' words. Others try to rescue Ponce's point without echoing his phrasing. It's like watching a room full of men walk on eggshells wearing sandals. You relax again. The vote is still a long way off, but at least it's on the horizon now that the speeches have started. You'd think the worst is over, but this is Rome. The real test isn't the waiting. It's the parade of increasingly obscure, often wildly off-topic declarations that follow. One by one, senators stand not always to weigh in on water rights, mind you, but sometimes just to remind the room that they exist. They own land, and they once had a dream involving a river spirit, and 2 goats that might have been prophetic. Case in point, Senator Vibedius rises and clears his throat with the flair of a man who's been practicing in front of a polished shield. Esteemed colleagues, he begins, though the matter at hand pertains to the Aqua Marcia. I must remind you that my own villa, blessed as it is by Fortuna herself, has suffered repeated dampness along its rear storeroom, and I believe this too deserves inquiry. You blink slowly, Lucius mutters. Is this about mold again? You nod. Vibedius once tried to argue that the gods were angry at his plumbing. That didn't go well. But it clearly hasn't stopped him. He continues. The spiritual moisture of the Senate must never be separated from the physical dampness of its constituents. Did he just say spiritual moisture? Lucius whispers. You shrugged, because who really knows anymore? A few senators humor Vibedius with nods. One pretends to write something down, but you can tell he's doodling a fish. The consul gives no reaction. His eyes are open, but they have that distant glaze look you've seen on temple statues and tired goats alike. Eventually, Vibedius trails off. No applause. He nods solemnly, as though his sacred duty to his villa's damp floor has been fulfilled. Then blessedly, someone speaks with purpose. Senator State Tilius, known for getting to the point, rises. The water belongs to the people. We argue about flow and fields, while half the tenement blocks in Subura don't even have clean fountains. A murmur of agreement ripples through the chamber. He continues briefly, smartly, and with just enough gravel in his voice to suggest he's skipped lunch for this. You respect that statilius sits. You make a note on your wax tablet. The duck now has a friend, Statilius Ducius, standing with a scroll and a stern beak. The debate rolls on. One senator insists the aqueduct should serve the army's training camps first. Strong backs build strong walls, he says. Another brings up temple access, claiming that sacred rituals are less effective when the priest has to sprinkle dust instead of water. Someone else, this may be your favorite, argues that diverting the flow will cause frogs to move, which will cause snakes to follow, which will disturb the sacred owl population, and before long, Rome will be overrun by crows. He ends dramatically. Mark my words, water changes everything. Lucius claps once. It echoes awkwardly. He doesn't stop. Smiling. Historians still argue whether these Senate debates actually influenced policy, or if the decisions were made privately and these sessions were for show. Some suggest that real deals were struck in bathhouses, behind temples, or over long dinners filled with lies and olives. Others claim the theatrics mattered, a way to vent steam before going along with whatever Caesar wanted anyway. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between, performance and politics. Like everything in Rome, the consul raises a hand. We will pause shortly for a midday interval. The room sags with visible relief. You glance at Lucius. Midday, it's nearly evening. He smiles grimly. You're thinking like a farmer again. He's right. Time is elastic here. A pause could mean 10 minutes, or an hour, or until the stars are visible and someone remembers they left their laundry on the line. The senators rise, stretch, crack joints. One complains audibly about the curse of marble benches. Another mutters, "My leg has turned into a column." You don't get up right away. It's oddly peaceful, just sitting. The chamber is half emptied now, with senators wandering toward the vestibule for fresh air. Or maybe to complain about each other without whispering. Lucius finally stands and groans. "I'm getting some air." You nod. "Bring back something edible." He pats his pouch. "I have exactly 3 olives and a pine nut. Then don't get mugged." He chuckles and disappears into the flow of togas heading for the doors. You remain. It's quieter now. Just a few senators still at their benches. Some scribes recording the key points, a guard near the entrance sipping water and pretending not to exist. You stare at your duck. His friend now has a little sign. More water, fewer speeches. A good slogan. A senator near you stretches out both legs and lets out a long, contented sigh. "I could fall asleep right here." You nod. At least it would be efficient. Dream through the next round of speeches. He chuckles. "I once dreamed. I voted 3 times. Woke up and realized I'd missed the real one. Oof. It passed anyway. That's the thing. Sometimes your vote hardly matters. But sometimes, it's the one that tips the scale. And you never really know which is which until after. Outside the chamber, faint sounds drift in carriages rumbling. Voices in the forum. A flute somewhere. Life continuing. Markets closing. Slaves calling out to each other in the twilight. Inside. Still waiting, the consul sits alone now, scanning his scrolls. You wonder if he knows how long this will go. Probably not. Maybe even he's waiting for word from a priest, an advisor, or someone far more powerful. Pretending not to care, a breath, a pause. The ducks on your tablet are now sitting too, eyes closed. You close yours for just a moment. Not asleep, not really. Just resting your politics. The sun outside is starting to dip, and with it, the light in the curia goes from golden to something closer to tarnished bronze. Shadows lengthen. Across the floor, threading between senators like lazy cats. You blink against the change, stretching your legs a little, trying not to think about how much longer you'll be here. Lucius returns, holding out a single olive like it's a peace offering. "You were robbed?" you ask. "Worse," he replies. "I shared." You take the olive anyway and pop it into your mouth with the exaggerated gratitude of a man starving in a marble prison. He sits beside you again and sighs. "Miss anything?" 2 senators argued over the philosophical weight of water. Any splashing involved. Just heavy metaphors. The chamber is refilling now, slowly, like a leaky amp. Senators slump back into place, brushing dust from togas and resuming their practiced expressions of dignified concern. A few are still chewing. One has a smear of fig paste on his sleeve that no one dares mention. The consul taps the armrest of his chair against 2 crisp knocks. It's the signal. The session resumes. Another senator rises. This one from a wealthy family with known holdings in Tiber. He speaks at length about fairness, tradition, and the importance of remembering where our ancestors chose to not put water. You admire his restraint. He's clearly defending his property without admitting to it. That's an art form in Roman politics. Say everything without saying anything. After him comes an older senator with a voice like cracked limestone. His speech is shorter, more bark than song, but his presence alone seems to carry weight. He speaks of Rome's founding myths. Romulus, the sacred boundary lines, the blessing of rivers, the curse of overreach. Then he says, "Let the water flow freely, but let not the Senate forget that sometimes a well-meaning ditch becomes a trench." You're not sure what that means, but it sounds important. Several senators nod solemnly. One might even be tearing up. Lucius whispers, "I think he just called Pansa a ditch." You smile, but beneath the surface, you can feel it. Things are shifting. Not dramatically, but enough. The tone is different now. The speeches are getting sharper, less meandering. People are beginning to choose sides. Some senators whisper to their neighbors after each speech. Others scratch quick notes. A few pretend to be neutral while subtly adjusting their seating to align more closely with certain camps. It's a dance. And you've seen it before. The slow choreography of political gravity, and then finally a call for final remarks. Your spine straightens. Even your toes feel alert. The consul announces that each faction will be granted one final speaker. Short, direct, no flourishes. You know what that means to men. Each trying to deliver the closing words that will linger in memory long enough to influence a dozen votes. The opposition sends up Senator Fimbria Man with salt and pepper curls, a thunderous voice, and a chin sharp enough to cut a fig in half. His tone is solemn, almost funereal. "We do not oppose growth," he says, "but we must oppose forgetting. Water is power. Water is the Republic's spine. When we divert it, we divert more than water, we divert loyalty, law, and legacy." The room listens, rapt. Even Lucius puts down his half-cracked pine nut. Fimbria bows. Not deeply, but enough. Then comes the final rebuttal from Senator Rulus. A younger man, but already well seasoned in the art of winning hearts by sounding heartbroken. "Rome grows," he says. "She must grow. The old pipes are not enough for the new people. To deny water is to deny Rome herself." Then, because Rulus never misses a theatrical moment, he uncorks a tiny clay bottle of water from Tiber, pours a few drops into a shallow bronze bowl, and lets them sit there, catching the fading light. He doesn't say a word about it, just lets the water glisten. It's a risky move. Some senators grumble. Theatrics, someone says, but others lean in. The water does look inviting. After all those hours in the dry air, and there it is. The final words have been spoken. The consul rises. We proceed to vote. You almost don't believe it. A brief shuffle, scrolls are gathered. The scribe moves to the central position. Two aides bring forward the wooden voting tablets, simple slats of wood, marked V. 4 UTI rogas, yes, and A for Antico, no. Each senator will drop theirs into a locked box. The system is simple, private, and silent. Lucius stands beside you, casting a sideways glance. Remember what we're voting on: water and frogs. and possibly ghosts, you reply, perfect. One by one, the senators file forward, each casting their vote. Some with confidence, others with the same energy as a man choosing between slightly bruised apples. You follow the line, stepping forward with the rest, tablet in hand, your fingers brush the wood smooth from handling, yet faintly warm. You drop it into the slot. That's it. Hours of waiting, days of build-up, one motion, one vote. You step back and return to your seat, feeling both hollowed out and oddly fulfilled. Lucius sits beside you again. You vote UTI Rogus. You smile. Didn't say. He raises an eyebrow. Keeping the mystery alive. Very senatorial. The consul waits until the last vote is cast. The scribe opens the box and begins to count aloud, for transparency. Each tablet lifted, marked, recorded. You watch the tally rise. And slowly. The decision takes shape. You sit very still as the count continues, listening to the rhythm of the tally like it's a drumbeat announcing the end of a very long, very dusty opera. One scribe reads aloud. Another makes notches on a wax tablet. Each vote drops like a pebble in your stomach. V-A. It's oddly calming, in that sleep deprivation through marble benches kind of way. You glance around the room. Everyone's eyes are on the scribe well. Most of them. One senator seems to be nodding off with his eyes open, which is either impressive or deeply concerning. Lucius leans toward you, whispering, I think my ears have stopped translating Latin. You murmur, you need more olives. He sighs. Don't we all? The scribe pauses to recount a stack. You hear the flick of wooden slats being shifted, the faint clack of one hitting the floor and being quickly retrieved. Every senator in the room collectively holds their breath for a moment, even though they pretend not to care. The vote is close. You can tell the consul remains stone-faced, but you think you see the corners of his mouth twitch, once either in curiosity or gasp. Hard to say at this hour. A whisper moves through the room like a breeze. To many UTI, it's going to pass. You keep your expression neutral. You're a professional now fully trained in the ancient art of pretending that any of this hasn't slowly devoured your sanity. The final tally is read aloud. The proposal passes. It's over. There is no cheering. That's not the Senate's style. Just a low murmur, relief from some, grumbling from others, and at least 2 audible humps. One senator crosses his arms and mutters, the gods will have opinions. Another simply shrugs. Let the frogs move. You and Lucius share a glance. He raises one brow. Well, you answer with a slow nod. Water rights secured. Emotional stability, less so. He smiles tiredly. You still got that duck. You hold up your wax tablet. The duck now holds a miniature jug of water over his head like he just completed a Herculean labor. There's a tiny V next to his foot. He voted, too. You say he always does. As the murmurs die down, the consul stands to make his final remarks. They're brief, mercifully so. He reminds everyone that civic duty requires stamina, wisdom, and above all, a willingness to be uncomfortable for extended periods of time. No kidding. Then he says something about the glory of the Republic, nods once with practiced solemnity, and exits the chamber like a marble statue on a moving platform, and just like that, the day is done. You remain seated for a moment, not because you want to, but because standing feels like an insult to your legs. which have fused with the bench like some tragic myth involving punishment by inactivity. Around you, the Senate begins to dissolve. Scrolls are gathered, cloaks adjusted, sandals shuffled back onto numbed feet. One senator looks down and discovers he's been sitting on a fig since midday. He looks at it, considers it, and eats it anyway. You finally stand, slowly, like a cracked statue brought to life. Lucius stands too, letting out a groan that echoes across the stone. Back to Subura, he says. Via the slow route, you reply, everything's the slow route. As you begin to exit, you overhear little conversations buzzing everywhere. Not about the law that just passed, but about dinner plans, aching joints, lost analysis, and whether that one senator was seriously wearing Greek sandals again. At the doorway, you pause and take one last glance at the curia, emptying but not empty. A few scribes still gather tablets. One senator is arguing quietly with a doorman about the exact time the consul actually entered. A pigeon lands on the lintel above the doorway and watches with the faint smugness of a bird that's never had to sit through a 5-hour vote on aqueduct directionality. You walk out into the cool air of early evening. Rome greets you with the scent of hearth smoke, warm bread, distant shouting, and the soft scrape of carts being hauled home through winding streets. Lucius takes a deep breath. Smells like freedom or lentils. He smirks. Same thing. You walk side by side for a few steps, each footfall oddly ceremonial, like a quiet parade for two. Then Lucius says, "Want to stop for a drink?" "Do you even have to ask?" He doesn't. You turn down a side street toward a small taberna tucked between two crumbling statues, and an alley that probably contains at least one semi-retired thief. As you walk, he says, "We didn't really accomplish anything today." You laugh. "We passed a vote, right? A vote. After 7 hours and a turnip tragedy." You nod. "And we avoided a snake prophecy. That has to count for something." He grins. "Long live the Republic." You raise a hand. "Long live the duck." He salutes back. The sun is nearly gone now, casting Rome in that soft orange glow that makes even the worst street corners look like they belong on a fresco. You feel the day's tension slip away, replaced by a kind of sleepy pride. You made it. You waited. You didn't lose your mind entirely. Historians still argue whether senators actually cared this much, whether they were wise old guardians of the state, or just privileged men with nice sandals and too many opinions. But you were there. You survived the waiting, the speeches, the olives, the duck drawings, and the ghost of Julius Caesar's ghost. You nod to yourself. Another day in the curia, another slow, weird victory. The taberna you and Lucius finally stumble into is dim, warm, and just loud enough to feel alive without making your skull vibrate. There's a cracked fresco on the back wall, something about Bacchus and a runaway chariot, and a serving boy with the tired speed of someone who's been dodging spilled wine since sunrise. Lucius collapses onto the nearest bench and gestures dramatically. "Bring us the strongest, weakest wine you have." The boy nods, which may or may not mean he understood. You slide into the seat across from him, every joint protesting. "I don't remember walking there. Did we float here?" Lucius rubs his neck. "I think I've become partially liquid. Like wine, but bitter." The wine arrives, moments later, blessedly cool. slightly watered, but acceptable. You each take a sip. It's nothing special. But right now, it tastes like freedom. Around you, the taberna is a soft chaos of clinking cups and murmured complaints. Other senators trickle in. Some you recognize from the session, others from previous long days in the curia. There's an unspoken rule here: leave the politics outside. Talk about family, or food, or dreams you had that may or may not have involved Jupiter in a bathrobe. Lucius looks up from his cup. You ever wonder what this city sounds like to someone who's never been here? You glance toward the open door. Rome, at this hour, hums. There's laughter in the alleys, the creak of carts heading home, the bark of a stray dog echoing off worn stone. Like ambition in sandals, you say, with a little vinegar. He smiles, then leans in. Let me ask you something. Serious now. Serious as a forum full of fruit vendors. Do you ever think the Senate does more talking than doing? You blink. That's not a light question. You take a slow sip. Of course. That's kind of the point. Lucius frowns. The point is to not do anything. You shrugged. The point is to make people think you're doing something, or to slow bad ideas down by making them walk in circles until they give up. He raises an eyebrow. That's cynical. That's Roman. He can't argue with that. Historians still argue whether the Senate of your time was a dying institution, clinging to relevance, or a vital machine grinding slowly toward progress. Some call it majestic. Others call it a group of rich men whispering under marble ceilings while the city burned and grew without them. You think maybe it's both. Majestic in intention, ridiculous in execution. Do you remember when we thought being a senator would be exciting? Lucius asks, grinning, like gladiator blood, but with scrolls. Exactly, you think about it. About the first time you walked into the curia, awestruck by the polished stone. The history in the air, the weight of the Republic resting politely on your shoulders. And now, you mostly associate it with back pain, olives, and the psychological impact of marble acoustics. You still believe in Rome? He asks suddenly. You pause. That's the question, isn't it? I believe in the idea of Rome, you say, which is different from believing in the schedule. Lucius raises his cup to the idea. You toast. The table beside you bursts into laughter. Someone told a joke involving a goat, a censor, and a poorly constructed aqueduct. You catch bits and pieces. Apparently, the goat was more eloquent than the senator. Time slips. Wine goes down like truth serum. You relax. Later, another senator joins your table kata with the whispery voice and the chronic need to explain things no one asked about. I timed today's session, he says, settling in without permission. 7 hours, 42 minutes, 14 speeches, for dramatic size, to actual votes. Lucius snorts. And one senator who brought a turnip. You add, don't forget the juggling. Ah, the juggling. Kata sighs like he's remembering a youthful romance. This is why I stay in the Senate. Where else would I see that? You smile? He's not wrong. Rome is filled with battles and temples, poets and tyrants, philosophers shouting at clouds. But only Heronly inside that long, slow swirl of the Senate do you find such a perfect mix of comedy and tragedy. Law and lunch. Kata leans in You know, I once fell asleep during a vote. Dropped my tablet. Voted by accident. Lucius raises a brow. What happened? It passed. Changed some obscure grain tax. I became a hero in one village. They sent me pickled beets for a year. You blink. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or horrified. Both, he says. More wine, more murmurs. Someone starts softly humming a funeral dirge, but in a cheerful key. It works, somehow. And then, just as you're about to suggest, it's time to leave, Lucius asks. So what now? You think. Because that's the other thing about Rome. You never really finish anything. Every law leads to another dispute. Every vote opens a door you didn't know existed. The water rights passed today. Next week someone will argue about maintenance crews. Or the frogs again. Tomorrow you say another motion. Another scroll. Maybe even another turnip. He groans. We're in a cycle. We are the cycle. And you both laugh, not the tired kind, but the slow, rolling laugh of two people who've accepted their fate and decided to find the joy in it anyway. Because in Rome, you wait. You vote, you argue, you hope, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you laugh with a friend and draw ducks in the margins. Not a bad life, really. The sky above Rome is now fully in its evening robes, violet edged with ash, soft folds of night settling over tiled rooftops and columned courtyards. You step out of the taberna and immediately feel it. The hush that creeps in after a long day has finally surrendered to dusk. The clatter of wagons has faded. Even the ever-lively Subura sounds tired. Lucius walks beside you, slower now. The wine has calmed him, not in a tipsy way, but in that old Roman fashion, just enough to keep the nerves quiet and the muscles lazy. Still thinking about the vote, he asks, only enough to regret not sneaking in a nap halfway through. He grins. You did. During that speech about sacred trench lines. Ah yes, the great trench soliloquy. It started with a rhetorical question about river nymphs, and ended with the speaker crying softly into his own sleeve. Or maybe that was just sweat. Either way, not his strongest day. Your sandals scuff gently against the stones, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Rome is always walking, always trudging forward with the same half-hopeful, half-exhausted rhythm. You pass by a small shrine, flickering with the last candlelight. Someone left an offering, figs, neatly stacked, probably to Mercury, judging by the winged helmet crudely etched above, or maybe to whoever controls bureaucracy. If there is such a god, they must live in the Curia, nursing a scroll collection. And an eternal sigh. Lucius pauses at the shrine, drops a small coin in the bowl, and whispers, for patience. You nod. Better hope he accepts bronze. Back at the top of the forum steps, you both stop for a moment, staring down at the empty plaza. It's rare to see it so quiet. No carts, no shouting vendors, just a few shapes moving in the shadows, and the glimmer of torchlight catching on marble. You sit on the edge of a column base, sighing deeply. Lucius does the same. Do you ever wonder, he says after a long silence, what it's all for? You glance at him. Which part? All of it. The votes, the speeches, the endless sessions where someone argues over whether birds flying east mean tax reform should be delayed. The rituals, the repetition, the duck drawings. You smile, especially the duck drawings. He chuckles. But seriously, do you think anything we do sticks? You tilt your head, thinking, I think it sticks in layers, you say, like wax on a tablet. You make a mark, someone smooths it out, you mark it again. Eventually, there's an imprint. Even if you can't see it, it's there. Lucius is quiet for a moment. Then, that was either poetic or very depressing. Why? Not both. You both sit in silence again. Historians still argue whether the Roman Senate was more pageantry than power in its final years. Whether it steered the republic or merely polished the edges as it cracked, but from where you sit, legs numb from stone and head foggy from hours of eloquent stalling, it doesn't feel powerless, it feels human, chaotic, proud, sluggish, hopeful. All of it. Lucius stands and stretches, joints cracking like a minor thunderstorm. We should go, he says. Before I start giving speeches to passing cats. You rise with a grunt. Just make sure you open with a quote from Hesiod. They like that. As you walk toward the street that leads home, the wind picks up slightly. Cool. Just enough to lift the hem of your toga and whisper through the torch. Brackets still smoking on the walls. You pause, turn back for a moment. The Kyria stands dark now, windows blank. But in your mind, you can still hear the echo of voices inside, some wise, some absurd. All woven into the endless tapestry of Roman days. You remember one of the early senators, old Gaius, mumbling under his breath during your first session. This place is a test of spirit. If you come in with hope, you leave with patience. If you come in with patience, you leave with a sore spine. He wasn't wrong, but you stayed, and you'll stay again tomorrow, because this is what being a Roman senator means, not glory or applause. Not empire-wide influence or sculpted perfection in stone. It means enduring, showing up, wading through the ridiculous and standing for the important. Even if the difference isn't clear until years later or never. It means listening to a man tell you frogs are omens, and another claims sacred water tastes different when blessed by Mars. It means leaning over to your friend and whispering, I think that guy just proposed marriage to a fig tree. And it means drawing ducks. Because it's either that or go quietly mad from boredom. You turn and walk on. The road home is long. And the torchlight grows thinner. Lucius says, what if we wake up tomorrow and the consul delays the next vote again? You laugh, then I hope someone brings a new parrot. He nods. That bird had presence. And together, you vanish into the city's fading heartbeat. The night rising like a soft tide behind you. You wake the next morning to the sound of sandals scraping cobblestone and a faint argument about fig prices drifting in through the shutters. Your back aches like you've been personally tackled by Mars, and your mouth tastes like last night's wine got into a fight with your tongue. Outside, Rome has already resumed its slow, glorious churn, vendors calling out from the forum, priests swinging incense in morning processions, a flock of pigeons attempting to own a statue of Minerva. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and immediately regret it. Every part of you has become a memory of stone benches and ceremonial stillness. Still, you get up. That's what senators do. They rise, they show up, they sit, they endure. You dress slowly, toga over tunic, sandals laced in loops. You no longer think about your wax tablet sits waiting on the table. The duck is still there. Lucius will be pleased. You step outside and feel the warm press of Roman summer begin to rise like a whisper that will become a shout by noon. The streets are already pulsing with movement, the city's rhythm resuming without pause. At the base of your street, you run into Senator Kata again. He's talking to a flower seller who seems equal parts amused and confused, explaining water law to a 12-year-old. You ask. Kata shrugs. She asked what I did yesterday. I answered. You nod. How fared you get? Got as far as frogs and turnips. Solid. Everyone loves amphibious symbolism. Kata snorts and continues on, gesturing wildly with a piece of lavender. You find Lucius already waiting at the curious steps, leaning casually against a column, and biting into something that may or may not be a pastry. You look rested. You say, I dreamt of ducks giving a speech. Was it better than yesterday? Much. You enter together. The curia is exactly as you left it, grand, echoing, impossibly still despite the people already filing in. There's something eternal about the place, like it's never empty, just paused, waiting for someone to start talking. About aqueducts again. You sit in your usual spot. The bench feels familiar now, like a relative you're not fond of, but can't seem to avoid at Saturnalia. Lucius glances around. Same faces, same sandals, new scrolls. You nod, like a stage with new props. Today's session will probably drag, too. Someone will bring up taxation, or temple maintenance, or whether an owl hooting near the Quirinal Hill means we should postpone voting on firewood distribution. Historians still argue whether Roman senators had any real power by this point, or if the Republic was already too far gone just waiting for the empire to stamp its final seal. But here you sit, not because you think you can stop the tide, but because you believe in being present as it shifts. The chamber fills. Cloaks are adjusted. Scrolls unrolled. You hear someone sneeze dramatically in the corner. Senator Vibetius, probably claiming it's a divine omen again. Lucius sighs. I think I left my patience in the taberna. You offer him the wax tablet. The duck now wears a laurel wreath. He takes it reverently. This will get me through today. The session begins. The consul walks in, this time only slightly late, and you all rise. As he clears his throat and begins the ceremonial opening, you settle into your bench. Your back protests. Your feet fidget. But your mind, surprisingly, is calm, because you've seen what it means to sit through it all, to weather the speeches, to survive the delays, to cast a vote that might not matter today, but might echo tomorrow, and to lean over when it gets unbearable, and whisper something ridiculous to Lucius, just to remind yourself you're still alive. This is what it means to be a senator, not the glory, not the sculpted busts, but the quiet stubbornness of showing up, even when nothing changes. Even when everything might wind dash down. And now, as the torches fade low in your imagination, and the echo of sandals on stone gives way to silence, you let the stillness wrap around you like a soft wool cloak. The marble benches are gone now. The speeches are over. The wax tablet rests gently at your side, its little duck sleeping too. Your breath slows. The city quiets. Rome recedes into the dusk of your thoughts. Just outlines now, arches and hills and soft, golden light that drifts like mist. The buzz of debate has faded into nothing more than a whisper in the corners of your memory, and you are weightless. free of motion, floating through a time and place where the world turned slowly, where votes took hours, and where every delay held a strange kind of comfort. There are no more speeches now, no more fig debates, no more frogs, only the quiet certainty that tomorrow will come, and you'll be ready, not with answers perhaps, but with presence. The curia is dark. Rome sleeps, and so do you. End of script. Sweet dreams.